The morning sun cast long shadows across the Afghan mountainside as Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez checked her equipment one final time. The SEAL team had been planning this mission for weeks, targeting a high-value compound where intelligence suggested two enemy generals were coordinating attacks against coalition forces. Maria wasn't officially part of the SEAL team, but as a combat controller attached to their unit, her skills in coordinating air support and communications made her invaluable to their operations. The compound sat nestled in a valley surrounded by rocky hills, its thick walls and strategic position making it nearly impenetrable from conventional approaches. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, the team leader, had studied satellite imagery for hours, mapping out entry points and escape routes. The plan was straightforward, but dangerous. A pre-dawn insertion followed by a swift strike to capture or eliminate the high-value targets before enemy reinforcements could arrive. Maria had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, but this mission felt different. The intelligence reports indicated unusually heavy resistance, with an estimated 40 to 50 enemy combatants protecting the compound. She had seen too many operations go sideways when the enemy was better prepared than expected. Her instincts, honed by years of combat experience, told her this wouldn't be a routine mission. The helicopter insertion went smoothly under cover of darkness. The team moved silently through the rocky terrain, their night vision equipment revealing the compound's defensive positions. Guard towers flanked the main entrance, and thermal imaging showed multiple heat signatures moving along the walls. Maria established her communication post on a ridge overlooking the target, ready to coordinate close air support if needed. As dawn approached, the team prepared for their assault. Morrison's hand signals were crisp and confident as he positioned his men around the compound's perimeter. The plan called for simultaneous breaches at 3 points, overwhelming the defenders before they could mount an organized response. Maria watched through her scope as the team moved into position, her finger hovering over the radio controls that could bring devastating firepower to bear on their enemies. The first sign of trouble came when the compound's lights suddenly blazed to life. Enemy fighters began emerging from concealed positions, far more than intelligence had predicted. Morrison's voice crackled through the radio, his tone urgent but controlled. The enemy had somehow detected their approach and was preparing a coordinated defense. What should have been a surprise attack was rapidly becoming a pitched battle. Maria could see muzzle flashes erupting from multiple positions as the SEAL team engaged the enemy. The carefully planned operation was dissolving into chaos as enemy reinforcements poured from buildings throughout the compound. Her training kicked in as she began calling in precise coordinates for air support, but she knew it would be minutes before help arrived. The team was outnumbered and quickly becoming surrounded. Through her scope, Maria witnessed the moment everything changed. An explosion near the main building sent debris flying, and she saw 2 figures in distinctive uniforms directing the defense from a protected position. Her heart raced as she realized these had to be the target generals, the high-value individuals the entire mission was designed to capture or eliminate. They were coordinating the enemy response with military precision, turning what should have been a quick strike into a deadly trap. Morrison's voice came through her earpiece again, this time with an edge of desperation she had never heard from the seasoned commander. Enemy fire was intensifying, and his team was taking casualties. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and Maria could see that without immediate intervention, the entire SEAL team might be lost. Her training and experience told her that sometimes the best-laid plans had to be abandoned in favor of survival. The order came through clearly, despite the static and gunfire in the background. Morrison was calling for immediate extraction and a general retreat. The mission parameters had changed dramatically, and continuing the assault would likely result in the loss of the entire team. Maria began coordinating with the extraction helicopter, while simultaneously calling in covering fire from available aircraft. The professional soldier in her understood the tactical necessity of withdrawal, even as every fiber of her being rebelled against leaving the enemy generals to continue their deadly work. As she watched the SEAL team begin their fighting withdrawal, under heavy fire, Maria made a decision that would define not only this mission but the rest of her military career. The enemy generals were still visible through her scope, and she realized that this might be the only opportunity to eliminate such high-value targets for months or even years to come. The weight of that responsibility, combined with her loyalty to her fellow soldiers and the broader mission objectives, created a moment of absolute clarity about what needed to be done. Maria's mind raced as she calculated distances and wind patterns, her sniper training taking over despite the chaos erupting below. The SEAL team was fighting a desperate rearguard action, their disciplined fire and movement barely keeping the overwhelming enemy forces at bay. Through her scope, she could see Morrison dragging a wounded teammate toward cover, while return fire chewed up the ground around them. Every second of delay increased the likelihood that good soldiers would die. The enemy generals had moved to a more exposed position, apparently confident that the Americans were in full retreat. They stood on a balcony overlooking the compound's main courtyard, gesturing and shouting orders to their troops. Maria could see them clearly now through her high-powered scope, their faces animated with the excitement of what they believed was imminent victory over elite American forces. Her radio crackled with increasingly urgent extraction requests from Morrison. The helicopter was inbound, but it would need several minutes to reach their position. Air support was still too far away to provide immediate assistance, and the enemy was pressing their advantage with ruthless efficiency. Maria watched as enemy fighters began flanking movements that would cut off the SEAL team's escape route entirely. Time was running out for everyone. The weight of her rifle felt familiar and comforting as Maria settled into her shooting position. Years of training had prepared her for moments like this, when split-second decisions could determine the outcome of entire operations. She understood the rules of engagement and the chain of command, but she also understood that sometimes exceptional circumstances required exceptional actions. Her loyalty to her teammates outweighed any other consideration. The first general was approximately 800 meters away, well within her effective range despite the challenging angle and environmental conditions. Maria controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the focused state that marked every successful sniper engagement. The morning wind was light but variable, requiring constant adjustment for each shot. She had one chance to make this work before enemy forces located her position and responded. Morrison's voice came through her earpiece one final time before she switched off her radio. He was ordering immediate evacuation for all personnel, emphasizing that the mission was now purely about survival rather than objective completion. Maria understood his position and respected his command decision, but she also knew that opportunities to eliminate high-value targets like these generals came rarely in warfare. Sometimes individual initiative had to override group tactics. The crosshairs settled on the first general's center mass as Maria made her final calculations. The distance was significant, but not impossible for someone with her training and equipment. More challenging was the angle, which required compensation for both elevation and the compound's position relative to her hiding place. She had practiced similar shots hundreds of times in training, but never with so much depending on accuracy and timing. Enemy fire was intensifying around the SEAL team's position, and Maria could see that they had perhaps minutes before their situation became completely untenable. The extraction helicopter was approaching, but it would be vulnerable to enemy fire if the situation wasn't stabilized quickly. Everything depended on eliminating the command structure that was coordinating the enemy response with such deadly effectiveness. The first shot broke with the characteristic crack of her high-powered rifle, the recoil familiar and expected. Through her scope, Maria watched the bullet's impact and immediately began adjusting for her second target. The first general dropped instantly, his coordinating presence suddenly absent from the enemy's defensive efforts. Confusion rippled through the compound as fighters looked around for new orders that would never come. The second general had reacted to his companion's fall by ducking behind partial cover, but Maria had anticipated this response. Her training had emphasized the importance of rapid follow-up shots when engaging multiple targets, knowing that surviving enemies would quickly adapt to the new threat. She tracked his movement, predicting where he would emerge as he tried to reach better protection. When the second general appeared in her crosshairs, Maria was ready. The shot was more challenging due to his defensive positioning, but her angle still provided a clear line of sight to center mass. The rifle bucked against her shoulder again, and she watched through the scope as the second high-value target fell. Within seconds, both enemy commanders were eliminated, their coordinated defense beginning to crumble without leadership. The effect on the compound's defenders was immediate and dramatic. Without their commanders, the organized resistance began breaking down into confused individual actions. Some fighters continued engaging the SEAL team, but others began looking for escape routes or better defensive positions. The overwhelming coordination that had nearly trapped Morrison's team was dissolving as quickly as it had appeared, creating the opening they desperately needed for extraction. The compound erupted into chaos as word of the general's deaths spread among the defending forces. Maria watched through her scope as enemy fighters began abandoning their coordinated positions, some fleeing toward the hills while others sought cover in buildings. The disciplined defensive line that had nearly overwhelmed the SEAL team was fragmenting into panicked individuals more concerned with survival than tactical objectives. Morrison's voice returned to her radio, confusion and relief mixing in his urgent transmissions. The enemy pressure had suddenly decreased dramatically, allowing his team to establish better defensive positions while they waited for extraction. He was trying to understand what had caused the sudden shift in enemy behavior, unaware that Maria had taken matters into her own hands from her concealed position on the ridge. Maria knew she had to move quickly. Her muzzle flashes would have been visible to any enemy fighters equipped with proper optics, and counter-sniper tactics would soon focus on her position. She began breaking down her shooting setup while maintaining visual contact with the compound below. The SEAL team was using the confusion to consolidate their position and treat their wounded, but they weren't out of danger yet. Enemy fighters were still present throughout the compound, though their actions lacked the coordination that had made them so dangerous minutes earlier. Some were attempting to establish new defensive lines, while others focused on evacuating equipment and personnel through rear exits. Maria could see that without their commanding officers, the enemy force was struggling to maintain any semblance of tactical coherence. The extraction helicopter appeared on the horizon, its distinctive silhouette recognizable even at distance. Maria began moving toward the predetermined pickup zone while maintaining radio contact with both the aircrew and the SEAL team. Her position on the ridge had provided excellent overwatch during the engagement, but it also left her isolated from immediate support if enemy forces located her. As she moved through the rocky terrain, Maria reflected on the decision she had made. Military regulations were clear about operating within the chain of command and following direct orders, but combat situations often required split-second decisions that couldn't wait for authorization. Her actions had likely saved the lives of the entire SEAL team, but she also understood that there would be consequences for disobeying Morrison's retreat order. The sound of scattered gunfire continued to echo from the compound as remaining enemy fighters engaged in sporadic resistance. However, without central coordination, their efforts lacked the focused intensity that had nearly overwhelmed the American forces. Maria could see the SEAL team beginning to move toward their extraction point, their wounded comrades supported by teammates who refused to leave anyone behind. Morrison's tactical radio discipline remained professional despite the stress of the situation. He coordinated the team's movement while simultaneously updating the incoming helicopter crew about landing zone conditions and potential threats. Maria listened to these communications while navigating toward the rendezvous point, proud of how the team maintained their effectiveness even under extreme pressure. The helicopter crew reported increased enemy activity in the surrounding hills, suggesting that reinforcements might be approaching the area. This intelligence added urgency to the extraction timeline, as a prolonged presence in the area would expose both the SEAL team and the aircraft to additional risks. Maria quickened her pace, understanding that every minute of delay increased the danger for everyone involved. When she reached the extraction zone, Maria found the SEAL team in a defensive perimeter around their wounded teammates. Morrison acknowledged her arrival with a curt nod, his expression unreadable behind his tactical gear. The professional soldier in him recognized the tactical success of eliminating the enemy commanders, but the team leader understood the complications that would arise from her decision to disobey direct orders. The helicopter's approach was marked by the distinctive sound of rotor blades cutting through mountain air, The pilot's skill was evident in how he maneuvered the aircraft through the challenging terrain, while maintaining awareness of potential ground threats. Maria helped establish a secure perimeter as the aircraft touched down, its crew ready to provide immediate medical attention to the wounded SEALs. Loading the helicopter required precise coordination, with the most seriously wounded soldiers receiving priority, while maintaining security around the landing zone. Maria provided covering fire as the team embarked, her rifle ready to engage any enemy forces that might threaten the extraction. The compound below showed continued signs of activity, but the disorganized nature of enemy movements suggested they were still dealing with the leadership vacuum created by the general's elimination. As the helicopter lifted off, Maria caught Morrison's eye across the aircraft's interior. His expression remained professional, but she could see questions forming that would need answers once they returned to base. Her decision to engage the enemy commanders had achieved tactical success, but military operations required accountability and adherence to established procedures. The conversation about her actions was inevitable, and its outcome would determine her future in special operations. The helicopter's medical bay became a scene of controlled urgency as the crew worked to stabilize the wounded SEALs during the flight back to base. Maria assisted the medics while processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. 2 enemy generals were dead. The SEAL team was safe, but her career hung in the balance due to her decision to disobey direct orders. The weight of command decisions and their consequences was something she had never fully understood until now. Morrison sat across from her, his tactical gear still bearing the dust and debris of combat. His wounded teammates were receiving expert medical care, but Maria could see the stress of command written clearly on his face. Leading elite soldiers into dangerous situations required balancing mission objectives with personnel safety. And today's operation had tested those principles in ways that textbook scenarios never adequately prepared commanders for. The base appeared ahead of them, its familiar structures representing safety and accountability in equal measure. Maria knew that debriefing would begin immediately upon landing, with detailed questions about every aspect of the mission. Her unauthorized engagement of the enemy commanders would be scrutinized by superior officers who understood both tactical necessities and military discipline. The outcome of those discussions would determine whether her actions were viewed as heroic initiative or dangerous insubordination. Landing procedures were swift and professional, with medical teams immediately taking charge of the wounded soldiers. Maria watched as stretchers carried her teammates toward the base hospital, grateful that her decision had helped ensure their survival. Whatever personal consequences she faced, the knowledge that good soldiers were alive because of her actions provided a foundation of moral certainty that would sustain her through the coming investigations. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the base commander, was waiting as the helicopter's rotors wound down. Her expression revealed nothing about her thoughts regarding the mission outcome, but her presence indicated the serious nature of what had occurred. Maria understood that senior officers didn't personally greet returning missions unless something exceptional had happened, either positive or negative. Today's events clearly fell into that category. Morrison approached Colonel Hayes with the bearing of a professional soldier, delivering a report to his superior officer. Maria could hear fragments of their conversation over the helicopter noise, catching references to casualties, enemy contacts, and mission parameters. Her name was mentioned several times, though the context wasn't clear from her position. The formal military communication style masked the human drama underlying the tactical discussion. The debriefing room was stark and functional, its white walls and metal furniture designed for official business rather than comfort. Maria sat across from Morrison and Colonel Hayes, flanked by intelligence officers who would analyze every detail of the mission for tactical lessons and operational security. The weight of military bureaucracy was evident in the formal procedures that governed even extraordinary combat achievements. Morrison's account of the mission was thorough and professional, detailing the intelligence preparation, insertion procedures, and engagement with enemy forces. His description of the tactical situation emphasized the overwhelming enemy numbers and coordinated resistance that had forced his decision to order a retreat. Maria listened to his clinical recounting of events that had felt like chaos and desperation. when experienced firsthand. When Morrison reached the point in his narrative where enemy resistance had suddenly collapsed, he paused and looked directly at Maria. His next words would determine how her actions were characterized in the official record, with implications for both her military career and potential disciplinary actions. The room fell silent as everyone present understood the significance of this moment in the debriefing process. Maria's own account began with her observation of the enemy commanders and her tactical assessment of their role in coordinating the defense. She explained her decision-making process, emphasizing the immediate threat to the SEAL team and the time-sensitive nature of the target opportunity. Her military bearing remained professional throughout the explanation, though she understood that her career might end based on the conclusions drawn from her testimony. Colonel Hayes listened without interruption, her experience in command providing insight into the complex factors that influence combat decisions. She understood both the tactical value of eliminating high-value targets and the importance of maintaining discipline within special operations units. The balance between individual initiative and organizational control was a perpetual challenge. In military leadership, the intelligence officers contributed their analysis of the enemy commander's significance, confirming that both generals were high-priority targets whose elimination would seriously disrupt enemy operations in the region. Their deaths represented a significant tactical victory that would likely save coalition lives over the coming months. However, the question remained whether this success justified Maria's decision to disobey direct orders during a critical phase of the mission. As the debriefing continued, Maria found herself defending not just her actions, but the principles that had guided her decision. Military service required obedience to lawful orders, but it also demanded initiative and courage when circumstances exceeded normal parameters. The tension between these requirements created the moral complexity that defined exceptional combat situations and the soldiers who faced them. The weeks following the mission brought a mixture of recognition and scrutiny that Maria had never experienced before. News of the successful elimination of 2 high-value targets spread quickly through military intelligence circles, with analysts confirming the significant impact on enemy operational capabilities. Intercepted communications showed widespread confusion and leadership struggles within enemy ranks, validating the tactical importance of her actions during those critical moments. Morrison visited her during the investigation period, his demeanor more relaxed now that the immediate pressures of combat leadership had passed. He spoke candidly about the impossible position she had faced, acknowledging that her decision had likely saved his entire team, while simultaneously creating a disciplinary dilemma for the command structure. His support meant everything to Maria, knowing that respect from fellow soldiers mattered more than official recognition or punishment. Colonel Hayes had initiated a thorough review of the incident, involving military legal experts, operational commanders, and special operations specialists. The investigation required balancing multiple competing interests, maintaining military discipline, recognizing exceptional performance, and establishing precedents for future similar situations. Maria understood that her case would likely influence how such decisions were evaluated for years to come. The wounded SEALs were recovering well, their injuries serious but not career-ending thanks to the rapid extraction that her actions had facilitated. Maria visited them regularly in the base hospital, finding comfort in their gratitude and support for her controversial decision. These conversations reinforced her conviction that saving the lives of fellow soldiers justified whatever personal consequences she might face. Media attention began focusing on the mission as details became public through official military channels. The successful elimination of enemy commanders represented a significant tactical victory that helped justify ongoing operations in the region. However, the media coverage carefully avoided mentioning the disciplinary complexities surrounding Maria's role in achieving this success, focusing instead on the broader strategic implications. Intelligence reports continued to highlight the operational chaos resulting from the generals' deaths. Enemy forces were struggling to maintain coordination without their experienced commanders, leading to reduced effectiveness in attacks against coalition positions. The ripple effects of Maria's split-second decision were creating tactical advantages that would benefit American forces for months, possibly years to come. The formal disciplinary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in the base's main conference room. Maria spent the preceding days reviewing military regulations and consulting with the legal advocate assigned to her case. She understood that the hearing would determine not just her personal fate, but potentially establish important precedents for other soldiers facing similar impossible choices in combat situations. Morrison had been called as a witness, along with other members of the SEAL team who had experienced the mission firsthand. Their testimony would be crucial in establishing the tactical context that had driven Maria's decision, providing the decision-makers with detailed understanding of the life or death pressures that had shaped those critical moments on the Afghan mountainside. The hearing room was filled with military officials representing various aspects of Special Operations Command and military justice. Maria recognized some faces from previous operations and training exercises, while others were unfamiliar senior officers whose presence emphasized the significance of the proceedings. The formal atmosphere underscored the serious nature of evaluating actions that had occurred in the chaos of combat. Colonel Hayes presided over the hearing with the dignity and fairness that had earned her respect throughout the special operations community. Her opening remarks acknowledged the complexity of the situation and emphasized the need to balance multiple considerations: tactical success, military discipline, and the precedent being established for future operations. Maria appreciated the colonel's recognition that simple answers were inadequate for such complex circumstances. Morrison's testimony was compelling and detailed, describing the tactical situation that had forced his retreat order and the subsequent collapse of enemy resistance following the elimination of the commanding generals. His professional respect for Maria was evident, though he carefully avoided advocating for any particular outcome. His role was to provide factual testimony that would help the panel understand the combat context surrounding her decision. The other SEAL team members corroborated Morrison's account while adding their personal perspectives on how the mission had unfolded. Their gratitude for surviving what could have been a catastrophic engagement was obvious, but they maintained the professional demeanor expected in formal proceedings. Maria felt supported by their presence, knowing that her fellow soldiers understood the life and death stakes that had driven her controversial choice. As the hearing progressed, Maria realized that the outcome would depend not just on military regulations, but on the panel's understanding of combat realities that couldn't be adequately captured in written procedures. The intersection of individual initiative, tactical necessity, and command authority created complexities that required human judgment rather than simple rule application. Her fate rested on whether senior officers could appreciate the unique circumstances that had demanded exceptional action. Colonel Hayes delivered the panel's decision with the gravity befitting a judgment that would influence military operations for years to come. The room fell silent as she began reading from the official findings, her voice steady and professional despite the magnitude of what was being decided. Maria maintained her military bearing, while internally preparing for either vindication or the end of her special operations career. The panel had concluded that Maria's actions, while technically constituting disobedience of direct orders, had occurred under extraordinary circumstances that warranted exceptional consideration. The tactical situation had presented impossible choices, where strict adherence to command orders would likely have resulted in catastrophic loss of American lives. Her decision to engage the enemy commanders demonstrated both tactical expertise and moral courage under extreme pressure. However, the panel also recognized that military discipline required consistent standards that couldn't be abandoned even in exceptional circumstances. Maria would receive a formal reprimand for disobeying direct orders, ensuring that the official record reflected both her tactical success and the importance of command structure. This balanced approach acknowledged the complexity of combat decision-making, while maintaining organizational integrity. The reprimand would not affect her security clearance or eligibility for special operations assignments, recognizing that her skills and judgment remained valuable to military operations. Colonel Hayes emphasized that exceptional soldiers sometimes faced impossible choices that required courage beyond normal duty requirements. Maria's actions had demonstrated the kind of initiative and dedication that defined elite military service. Morrison, approached her after the hearing concluded. His relief evident despite his professional composure. He had spent weeks concerned about the potential impact on both Maria's career and his own team's reputation. The panel's balanced decision provided vindication for the tactical success, while acknowledging the legitimate concerns about maintaining military discipline. His respect for Maria had grown throughout the process, recognizing the personal courage required to make such difficult decisions. The intelligence briefing that followed the hearing revealed the full scope of Maria's impact on regional operations. The elimination of the two enemy generals had created a leadership vacuum that opposing forces were still struggling to fill months later. Coalition casualties had decreased significantly in areas where those commanders had previously coordinated attacks, suggesting that her split-second decision had saved numerous American and Allied lives. Media coverage of the hearing's outcome focused on the broader questions of military leadership and individual initiative under combat conditions. Military analysts praised the panel's nuanced approach to evaluating actions that defied simple categorization as either heroic or insubordinate. The case was cited as an example of how modern warfare required both disciplined organization and individual courage in extreme situations. Maria returned to active duty with a renewed understanding of the weight that individual decisions could carry in military operations. Her experience had taught her that leadership sometimes emerged from unexpected sources during critical moments, and that moral courage often required accepting personal consequences for the greater good. The formal reprimand became a badge of honor among her peers, who understood the tactical and moral complexities she had navigated. The SEAL team requested Maria for their next high-priority mission, their confidence in her abilities strengthened by her performance under pressure. Morrison's recommendation emphasized her tactical expertise and decision-making abilities, noting that exceptional soldiers were defined by their actions during impossible situations rather than their adherence to routine procedures. Her reputation within the special operations community was enhanced rather than damaged by the hearing's outcome. Training programs began incorporating Maria's case study into their curriculum, using her experience to teach future leaders about the balance between individual initiative and organizational discipline. Military academies analyzed the tactical and ethical dimensions of her decision, helping prepare new officers for the complex realities they would face in combat situations where textbook solutions proved inadequate. Years later, Maria reflected on that morning in Afghanistan and the chain of events it had set in motion. The decision to engage the enemy commanders had lasted only seconds, but its consequences had shaped not only her career, but broader discussions about military leadership and moral courage. She understood that exceptional circumstances sometimes demanded exceptional responses, regardless of personal cost. The two enemy generals remained eliminated, their deaths continuing to create tactical advantages for coalition forces long after the immediate crisis had passed. Maria's willingness to accept personal risk and potential career consequences had generated strategic benefits that extended far beyond the specific mission parameters. Her actions demonstrated that individual courage could produce results that changed entire operational landscapes. The formal reprimand remained in her personnel file, a permanent reminder of both her tactical success and the importance of military discipline. Maria wore this mark with pride, understanding that it represented the kind of difficult decision-making that defined elite military service. Sometimes doing the right thing required accepting consequences that others might view as punishment. But true soldiers understood the difference between bureaucratic discipline and moral failure. Her story became part of military legend, inspiring future generations of soldiers to understand that exceptional service sometimes required exceptional courage in the face of impossible choices.